Good. Thank you very much indeed, Jenna. And it's lovely to be part of this excellent conference. And thank you all very much to the organising team. Congratulations on setting this up. I'm Clare Wright, and I'm talking today with Alison Leslie and Sally Heier. We are all at the University of Leeds. I'm a professor of linguistics and language teaching in the School of Languages, Cultures and Societies. Alison is a lecturer in EAP and also leader of the embedded literacies delivery for the Faculty of Social Sciences. And Sally Heier was one of our participants in the study that we'll share with you briefly. And then we'll talk together as a sort of campfire, if you like, around what it meant to Sally to take part in the study and what we learned from her as a co-creative participant. So um,
Oh, sorry, that's me.
that's
Yeah.
you. So, our project, Stepping Up, Standing Out, was based very much on our own experiences of working with international students for a very long time between us, Alison and myself, but also recognising current and I think welcome developments as represented by this conference, for example, in foregrounding the role of international students and in our work, Alison and myself, we work mainly with master students. Leeds has done quite a lot of leadership in trying to build more inclusive environments, and we've recently signed up to the We Are International Student Charter, in which it's very much a key goal for international students to participate in the life of the university and feel that they belong. So our research project has lasted for 3 years. We're in the final stages now. We've been funded by the university to investigate barriers to international students in participating and in finding ways to feel valued in participating. As was mentioned yesterday in our opening sessions, we're really beginning to know quite clearly what a lot of the barriers are now, but one of them I think remains ways for student voices to be clearly heard. We're very and to feel valued, I think, as well, that there's a lot of deficit discourses that were mentioned yesterday. I think we as deliverers of various sorts of academic language, content, supporting activities, know many students who feel that they can find many challenges. So what we wanted to do was have a sort of multi-method case study approach uh, involving both surveys for people who didn't necessarily want to participate with a lot of time, focus groups with people who were able to give us a bit more time to try and put some voices into some of those challenges that have been identified, particularly in more quantitative ways. And we wanted them to have the chance to really reflect on their lived experiences of what it was like to engage with academic support over the year of an international PG student. This is a very short time here, and what it meant for them in terms of if they were engaging academically, but perhaps struggling in other ways as well. And so by the time we had a lot of quantitative and qualitative data, we set up some co-creation workshops with the students with the idea of providing perhaps something that would be a bit simpler, a bit more accessible, and would be from the students. So this is very much aimed to put the students at the foreground of creating peer-to-peer based guidance.
Okay, so these are the resources that were created. The one on the left was one that we created first just to get a sort of sense of take up with this. One of the findings we got from our data was that students often find it quite difficult knowing where and how to access the support available. So we came up with this just quite simple infographic with QR codes. And then we used that as a sort of template to ask students, what sort of guidance they would give to future students on what support was available. And that's where the other two resources came from. What was quite interesting was the fact that we had another one which was like a sort of timeline reflecting that sort of journey of skills development, and then the other one more of a storyboard telling a narrative of sort of that study but also life journey. And you'll notice that the one on the left has got international PGTs on it. We've deliberated and we are still deliberating about that label. And that's something that kind of prompted, I guess, us to think about coming and sharing our experience at this conference, because we're not sure whether we are kind of feeding into that deficit narrative by using that label, or what we are finding now actually is that these resources are particularly useful for our colleagues, our academic colleagues in particular. And so perhaps for them, it's just a very sort of easily labeled resource that they can use with their students, particularly those who are not so familiar with teaching international students. But that's something that we are going to discuss later and pose to Sally about how she feels about that label. So yeah, what we got was some amazing feedback at the end of the workshop. This is just one of many quotes that we got from a student, which again prompted us to think, okay, perhaps there was something more to this. We felt that the feedback, although we acknowledge that there might be a kind of performative, pleasing element to it, we felt it was fairly genuine. It came from a good place in the sense that students enjoyed that space for being perhaps their authentic selves, feeling that they mattered. And again, that's what sort of prompted our discussions around this. And both Claire and I are sort of reaching out into other sort of those sort of communities of, you know, sense of belonging in the university now, and thinking about how we can connect with those through this. So over to our questions. These are some questions that we've come up with in conjunction with Sally as well, about the kind of questions she would like to discuss. So I think I'm going to ask then, Sally, the obvious first question, which is why do international students, bearing in mind that Sally may not represent all international students, but perhaps Sally, could you tell us why you chose to collaborate in this research?
Yes, so you actually stole the first part of my answer.
Oh, sorry.
No, no worries. No, obviously, I can only speak for myself. I mean, that is one of the questions, isn't it? How far can one person or a group of people really represent a very diverse group? But from my point of view, why I participated in this research, it was firstly to help others, because I think as international students, we have a lot of things to figure out. And I was just keen to share my experience with other people that will be in the same situation as I was, so that they could benefit from it. And I was hoping that I can contribute to building up that sort of repertoire that international students can benefit from in the future. And the other reason was that I wanted to be part of a conversation that is about international students, as an international student myself, because I felt that a lot of discourse, not only academic but also political, is talking about us and not with us. And during that time when I joined this research, there was a lot of talk in the UK about the graduate visa, so the visa that international students get after they finish their course. And there was a lot of talk about, you know, international students just want to game the system, they want to take advantage, the route is abused. And obviously, as people who are not UK citizens, we do not really have a political voice. We cannot vote to counter these things. So for me, taking part in that research was a way to get a different avenue to express my feelings and to share my experiences. So hopefully it can influence the discourse in that way.
That's great.
So yeah.
Go on,
Should I
go
ask
on,
the
Sally.
next question?
Yeah.
Yes. So the next question is, with that, in keeping that in mind, what I wanted from this research for me personally, how is it possible for research with international students to meet both the researchers and the participants' purpose?
Yeah, like I'll go first with that. You know, I've always assumed that research should be a conversation, and it should be about solving a problem, and you know, bringing together people whose lived experiences can be improved and changed. So I've always taught international students. I've always been interested in in them as people and what their own engagement with studying in the UK means to them, or if we're looking at UK students studying abroad, what it means as a person to become someone in that plurilingual, pluricultural space, but also with that sort of political weight of global English as a current lingua franca, what it means to come into a second language English space and a UK space where the institutions seem to hold so much power. But I've always assumed that the students I teach are there to be natural problem solvers, that they've got themselves to UK for a start, and to be critical and creative thinkers. And I think, you know, for me, this project has been very much trying to find better ways of designing the way I think about the research conversations to ensure that students can build more confidence if there's something that they're not familiar with, in who they are as critical thinkers, not just in an academic purpose, but as a life skill, if you like. So for me, that the research I hope has been related to what students can then go on to do with their lives in terms of their wider experiences. Alison, how about you?
Yeah, definitely. I think we were both very keen, weren't we, to make sure that we were positioning international students as sort of as much as possible as partners in this. We were very aware of the power dynamics, weren't we? I mean, both of us are teachers. I am teacher of, I was Sally's teacher at the time, and of other students who took part. So we wanted to, so I think we were very keen at the beginning, weren't we? We made sure that we used kind of gatekeepers and research assistants at the initial data collection stages. But for the co-creation aspect, it was really important for our purpose as well that we were in the room with students and that we were, as you say, we were partners, we were co-constructing that knowledge together. We were coming with our own sort of hypotheses, I guess, pre-assumptions about, you know, what we, from our experience of teaching, as you said earlier, have observed in terms of barriers. I think also for my students in particular, given that I am responding to their sort of requests and needs in terms of understanding their discipline. A lot of my students who are from sociology and social policy don't necessarily have, I mean, Sally, I think, was an exception because Sally came with research experience, but a lot of the students, and as Sally said, she wanted to help her peers as well. A lot of those students haven't had that previous research experience. And if they have, it's a very different way of doing research to how we do it at Leeds, with, you know, very strong focus in a social science research, strong focus on sort of ethical considerations, for example. So for me as well, I guess our purpose as researchers was to kind of model and allow students that space to apply a theory to practice approach. And, you know, I know myself, I always say to my students, by participating in other people's research, it can help you reflect on your own design and approach. And so, you know, it served that kind of dual purpose in that sense. Yeah.
I'm conscious of time. I think we're hoping to finish in a couple of minutes and then have plenty of time for discussion after. So if I may, I think I'll skip to our final question now and ask Sally, how do you feel about research done for you, about you, with you, hopefully? And we mentioned earlier the idea of the label international, you know, how far that is reinforcing any kind of deficit or othering narratives, or do you feel there is a growing sense that the having research in this space is empowering?
I do think that the label international students for the people who research this, it does carry certain assumptions with it. I mean, if we just imagine what we think an international student looks like, for example, I think we all have our own typical image in front of us. So it is in a way a bit creating a homogeneity, if that's correct pronunciation, that in reality isn't necessarily there. So, for example, I'm an international student, but I'm an EU citizen, and I definitely face different challenges from other international students who came all the way from China. And I mean, the question is a bit how much is what does that labeling do with oneself? So for me, it never meant anything really, because I also grew up in a context where being an international student going abroad was something that could be useful. It was something that gave you more experience. Whereas now, I think that has very much changed. The political context of international students has changed. So it is a bit difficult to do research without contributing to this deficiency. And I think, yeah, focusing on the differences is not necessarily, it can be helpful because they are there. I think this is the other thing. You don't want to go into the other direction where you're just like, oh, you have so many advantages. You can do so many things that home students cannot do. And then, you're being a bit dishonest with students there. So I think for research, this could mean that like the focus should be to give these the participants, hopefully not the research, but the active participants, the chance to build their agency, to express how they navigate things, to give them the chance to explain their behavior and how they navigate the world around them. And I think in that way, research can be very empowering if participants actively help to frame and shape the research, then it can be very, very useful and help them get more empowered.
Thank you. So I think on that positive note, we'll finish our presentational part, and then hopefully, Jenna, that's leaving a good time for questions as planned.